Well, I was going to address terrible takes on Syria, but I'll just do that on Twitter. I mean, what we're seeing now just with the takes is like the worst one is, I mean, just generally speaking, is I hope this doesn't become like Libya, but for now, let's celebrate. Like, I really look forward to bullying you all when it becomes Libya and you all want to just turn away and pretend this didn't happen and just pretend that this, just moving along. And neocon propagandists like Josh Rogan will just move on because they don't actually care about the Syrian people. The only Syrian people he actually knows are like CIA assets who are furnished to him so that he could propagandize for the dirty war. But just remember what happened with Libya after I remember like Nick Kristof, the in-house R2P humanitarian interventionist for the New York Times, wrote some piece after the Libyan government was destroyed and Libya fell under NATO intervention that Libyans want to hug NATO. And then he just stopped writing about it. Everybody stopped caring about Libya after, mission accomplished. These are mentions of Libya and human rights from 2004 up to 2011, when the NATO assault led to the murder of Gaddafi and the destruction of the Libyan state. And then they just peter off quickly. You don't even see much of a resurgence. I think this little bump right here might be the Manchester attack by Salam Abedi, who was trained along with his father by the British MI6 and then given a Royal Navy boat lift back to Manchester from Libya, where they had fought. But basically no one cared about Libya anymore. And I think that's what we could see happen, at least with the sort of the mainstream cheerleaders, the congressional cheerleaders, the neocon class, the Beltway think tankers. And that's the tragedy of it all. But I'm going to remind people that we had been calling this out for years and years and years, after getting it definitely wrong at certain points. It all became clear to me what was taking place and what was going to happen. And this so-called civil war, which was always a proxy war, it hasn't stopped yet. I think it's just getting going. It's going to be even uglier and more consequential for the region, and certainly for the Palestinian struggle. There is absolutely no doubt that the result of this dirty war has weakened the Palestinian struggle.
Big time. Oh, Israel's ecstatic. And the point about Libya, another Libya, I mean, I think the thing is that sort of obscures that it's already been a Syria, which was disaster. I mean, the Syria dirty war is even worse, I think, than what happened in Libya. Certainly more people killed, even more destruction of the country than Libya, which is more refugees, because it's gone on for so much. I mean, it started the same year, but the fighting in Syria has, I think, gone on for longer. And we can hope that, I mean, this time, like, for example, in Iraq, when the U.S. destroyed Iraq, they dissolved the Iraqi military, and that was a catastrophic decision because it basically created a whole new insurgency. And it also fueled sectarianism. Maybe this time they've learned from that. They're not going to do everything they can to fuel sectarianism and state collapse this time, on top of already the extent to which Syria has collapsed as a state, which is a lot. But again, history does not offer much optimism there. And especially when the leader of the rebellion is Jalani, a sectarian who has presided over atrocities and is the former leader of Al-Qaeda in Syria. It's hard to feel that things are going to get any better. And I've been hearing from some friends of mine in Syria today. They're in different parts of the country. People are just scared, and they're waiting for what's next.
Justifiably. And I think, you'll see that loyalist forces and Shia Christians will have to be reorganized with new militias to defend themselves. Iran may participate in that in the next couple of years. You're going to see just a reframing of sectarian divisions that were not so profound before the dirty war began. and it's going to be horrible for everyone. So congratulations, enjoy quote unquote liberation. And I see you getting attacked, Aaron, people saying, this somehow discredits you. No, you're just going to be vindicated, unfortunately, again and again and again for everything you've said. It's all going to come true in more extreme form now. And it'll just be more discrediting to this whole section of the Western left and the NGO industrial complex that cheered on all of these regime change wars and that fall for every Coney 2012 style psyop all the way up to Ukraine, while clamoring for the liberation of Palestinians, which will only happen when the system of Western imperialism, which relies on this whole narrative that comes out of the post-World War II liberal so-called rules-based order, when that is actually countered. But they're simply reinforcing it again and again and again, turning words like liberation, sapping them of so much meaning that they mean as much as anti-Semitism does today. So it needs to be called out. And, if you haven't learned your lesson by now, you're a dupe. You're a complete dupe. You've been bamboozled. You've been hoodwinked enough to wake up to what time it is.
Some people just don't like to learn facts, and they go with their emotional reaction to thing, and also what is conventional. It's challenging to go against a conventional narrative. They don't make your life easy when you do that, and it takes a lot of work. But the facts are all there. I mean, at this point, anybody, especially who claims to be critical of U.S. foreign policy, who cared about Palestine, they're all there. Now we're going to continue to learn over the years new details of the dirty war. I mean, we don't know, for example, the exact CIA budget, because that's a secret, but we do know from Edward Snowden that it was $1 out of every $15 in the CIA's budget. And who knows what more disclosures are yet to come. But what we know is already a lot. And that includes the cover-up of a chemical weapons investigation in Syria, in which Syria was accused of using chemical weapons in Douma. And as we've shown, based on leaked documents from the OPCW, the actual chemical weapons investigators who went to Syria to investigate this alleged attack in Douma found no evidence of a chemical attack, and found actually ample evidence that it was staged by the insurgents on the ground. And
so many people still believe that.
People still believe it and still attack people like us for reporting on the leaked documents, when in journalism, the lifeblood of journalism, one of them is leaks and whistleblowers. And
people who correctly were skeptical of Israel's 40 beheaded babies claims want to believe other atrocity propaganda that serves the same exact purpose.
I know. Yeah.
And for sectarian reasons, for reasons of just sheer idiocy. And they're either going to have to fade away, or I don't know what cope they'll come up with next. I can actually see proposals put forward within Western intelligence to sponsor the moderate rebels all over again, but as the moderate government or some moderate faction, quote unquote, moderate faction in Syria, because violence is sectarian and communal violence is going to get so out of control. I can actually see them trying to do that. It's like everything we've been talking about for the last decade. Is just going to repeat itself in more farcical form.
Well, what happens to these sanctions now? These sanctions that have crushed Syria's economy, as people like James Jeffrey brag about, that have raised the price of food, that have made it impossible to rebuild. What happens to those sanctions now? I mean, maybe there's a future now in which, some kind of path can be found where those sanctions are lifted. And then, even though it will be the most cynical thing ever to destroy a country, prevent it from rebuilding, finally get the regime change you want, and then forget about, all your concerns about human rights and just let the sanctions go in the country. But at least in that case, it'd be extremely cynical, but at least in that case, people might be able to breathe a little bit, which is what the Syrian people need. And, my friends who are there are just exhausted. Everyone's ground down. It's horrible. It's been horrible, especially these last few years. And the complaint I hear about the government is the government's been in denial and has not taken any serious steps to do what they can under this economic siege. And maybe they're in a possible situation, but there was a sense, and again, there's a few people that I speak to in Syria, that the government had abandoned them. And these are people, by the way, who went out in the streets in 2011 and wanted economic reforms and wanted freedom of speech, but did not want a takeover by people like Mohammed al-Jawlani, which is what they're getting now.
When you have a country divided up by rival militias, that is a form of sanctions. Who's going to control the oil fields, the Conoco oil fields? Is it the SDF, which is backed by the U.S.?
Yeah.
The Rojava?
Yeah.
Are they? Will it be Jolani? What's happening in Libya, where you have two rival governments vying for control of the oil fields? This is September of this year. Libya's oil exports crashed by 81% because of a political standoff between the two rival governments. So that's the future. There's no liberation without sovereignty, without the ability to resist. And that's what you have in Syria.